This submission today is part 4, and it's about all Aboriginal citizens look the same to the Crown and to some federal chiefs, as witnessed at Ipperwash, Stoney Point, or the River of Salvo. I say this as a researcher, but also as one of the elders and leaders from Stoney Point. When I began my work back in 1985, I started a year before because I had to listen again to the elders who were displaced in 1942. They're pretty old and they're near death, some of them. And this is my mother here. We went looking for people who were also displaced from Stoney Point. There weren't many families, allegedly 18. 12 were Chippewa, 6 were Potawatomi. The reason why I used the heading all Aboriginal citizens look alike on paper is because the government of Canada and Her Majesty the Queen's representatives here and the King's prior to her appointment or reign as Queen looked at our people and eyed the lands and knew that the resources were to be common to their people, their league subjects. The problem is, King George, I believe II, on April 22nd, 1726, outlined that Upper Canada was unalienable to anyone outside of Aboriginal descent. And the War of 1812 came along after the Royal Proclamation was made. And Tecumseh went to war and he gathered up with the people to fight with the United States. So that's history. Now we're coming forward in time and looking at the people who were displaced in 1942. So in the last episode, basically, chapter 3, outlined that in 1972, Jean Chrétien was Minister of Indian Affairs, and Chief Charles Shawkens, late Chief Charles Shawkens, made a demand of Canada and said, return Stoney Point to the Stoney Point people who were at Kettle Point. The problem is not all the people were at Kettle Point. My mother was, same as my dad. They were willed that land at Stoney Point, portions of it, as improved property from Joseph Johnson or Wobgans. So what happened between 1972 and an agreement made in 1981, and monies were made payable? We have a letter from Royal Ferguson. He was a member of Parliament, and it has the letterhead on there with the House of Commons on there, and he outlined to a reporter, and the reporter gave me a copy of that letter, and he says, I am aware that some of the Stoney Point people will not receive their portion of compensation. So we fell through the cracks, and nobody actually took care of our family. And as a result of that, I asked my mother, did you receive anything? She says, no. Did you have any title to the land at Stoney Point in 1942? She says, well, what we had, the government took it through the Indian agent, which was a will and different things. When I went to Ottawa to seek the answers to that, found out that Dr. MacDonald, late Dr. MacDonald, sent in the will to the Department of Indian Affairs, and that was on file. So the lands were indeed processed through, you could say, civilized Indians. They knew that to direct the land and compensations and different things like that, or help, or recognition of title, they had to have something on paper. And that's what happened. So in 1979, as negotiations were wrapping up, we find that a number of councillors looked and they said, that's right, Stoney Point has a right to compensation. So contingencies were made for those that were moved. In this document, which was before the federal court, and I've got nothing against the jurisprudence of the judges. Rather, I approve of law. Why? Because we still have to be civil about what we do. We have to prove what we're saying. So the court said, all right, where's the land grant for Ontario? Well, we still have it. Well, we don't, but it's still in possession. Chief Charles Chartrand, who made the demand for return of Stoney Point, presented a medallion from the War of 1812, and it was presented to my great-grandfather. Was that for all of Ontario, or for his land from Goderich down? The thing of it is this: there's alienated portions and unalienated portions. So they used terminology which was foreign to Aboriginal people. So who cared for our people? Actually, no one. But the people who were in council at the time knew that they had to have lawyers. So they hired a law firm. And a lawyer by the name of Rocliffe presented his claim on behalf of the chief and council at Kettle Point. But with him came other lawyers, Rocliffe, Fleck, Sarder, Gray, and Bruce. And I looked at, why did these learned men put together a claim, a joint claim of alleged landowners and the band council, and left out my mom and dad? I found out my mom and dad weren't the only ones left out, but Stuart Elijah and Elizabeth Elijah were another group. And it says that the government knows who they paid and who they didn't pay. So a fight, not so much as a physical fight, but a presence. When we took Camp Hipperwash in 1993 on May 6th, we had a leak within our group. I don't care how big or how small your group is, someone's always going to have a difference of opinion. So we knew we had to come to a conclusion, take the land or leave it. My decision, had submitted to the people, was we go on the land and check out the law to see if it's binding, not just on us, but on Canada. Canada, I had to say this, was kind of arrogant and ignorant, because they gave us band numbers, they gave us driver's license, they gave us social insurance numbers, they gave the reserves numbers, 43, 44, 45, and so forth, as I explained before. So what happened? Was landowners or occupants not recognized? Oh, they were. On February 20th, 1900, PC order, Federal Order in Council 374 was passed. It went against the wishes of the Stoney Point people. And they said, we oppose a subdivision and survey of our land, because they knew that by this document, the lands were going to be cut down and divided up again on paper, but not by the people. So you have Highway 21 going past Camp Hipperwash today and so forth. But I didn't want to get into that part at this point. What I wanted to show to the people was that we do have the documents that Canada, or the Crown, made the Chief and Council obligated to sign a contract to save harmless Her Majesty the Queen from all claims, actions, and suits. And the Crown, in turn, promised to protect the Chief and Council from all claims and actions and suits. So we have a stalemate that nobody can break on the part of the Crown, on the part of Kettle Point, who calls himself Kettle and Stoney. So what we wanted to do is prove to the people, we do have the documents, we have the submissions, and as late as February of, what year is it? 1995, the chief at Kettle Point was obligated to identify and save harmless the Department of National Defense, and it was signed by their international lawyer. Again, the lawyer was just an extension of the Chief and Council talking to the government. I don't trust lawyers entirely, but they have a job, they have a role. And just like the government, they have a job, they have a role to get the best deal possible. So what happened? They eliminated some people on paper. One of them was my mom and my dad. Even though we have the wills, we have the recognition, we have the title, yet we are stepped over. And this has dragged on since I began my work in 1984. And it's already 2021. So that shows you how slow the government of Canada can be. But if the people was really concerned We're not about to dislocate or remove people from the land. We want recognition. We want our own government. We can't trust a foreign government, even though Canada is a part of our structure. We have to have someone that will oversee and protect our interests independently and legally. We have an entitlement to compensation. As far as I know, Kettle Point received approximately $500 million. They have an accountant in London, Ontario, but I'm not going to get into the issue of who got what. Doesn't matter. I'm happy for them. I'm happy that they got compensated. But they cannot stop my family from receiving their compensation. So I'm going to end this conversation tonight with a review, because I was asked by several people as to what are you going to do next. Well, part of it is review. The government and the chief and council stopped us from getting welfare, of all things, or social assistance programs in 1993 when we went on the land at Camp Ipperwash. They told Bob Ray's government, don't give them anything, we'll do it. We're the legal party to this responsibility. Again, in 1995, there was a chief federal negotiator. He says, we're going to change the names to numbers. And he signed it, and they accepted it, trying to throw another curveball in there. This document here, as stated before, is dated March 2nd, 11:25 a.m., 1972, or 3, and submitted by Sarnia and Kettle Point. And what it done is it eliminated Stoney Point on paper as a separate entity, and they assumed control with the blessing of the government. So if somebody else controls my interest, I've got no say, which is kind of illogical. They can't destroy historical documents. And now we're ready to go forward again. In the next chapter, we'll review as to what happened during those negotiations and why is the government hiding so many documents on our people. Maps have been removed from the land registry. When the government sits down to talk, they stall. They say, we got to go back to our principles. Natural. When I went back and sat with the government, talked with them, I went back to my mother, to my family. What do you want? They said they're willing to listen, but it doesn't mean they're willing to pay. So that's where we're at today. But hopefully in the future, that this will be resolved very promptly, very quickly. Otherwise, we have no choice but to look for other means of revenue, like the Pinery Provincial Park, or former Pinery Provincial Park, which we laid claim to, not in 2016, but in 1993, when we then took Camp Ipperwash back and called it Stoney Point. That's the River of Sauble. But if you go to the treaties, which are invalid, my great-grandfather received the deed for Ontario, or Upper Canada, or to his area of habitation. He was not nomadic, but he did go out hunting. Our people never hunted to an extreme or an extinction of a species like small game or even the fish. If the fish were getting thinned out, they would go to another location, but they were not nomadic. They always returned back to the place of their habitation, the place of their forefathers. What they fought for in the War of 1812 was that accustomed way of life. And that's what I do today. Whenever I talk, I rely on the Lord as being able to keep me. The book of Romans, I was telling my son, outlines that I say that which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God. And I would not let you sacrifice to devils. And being a Christian, when I first became a Christian or believer, it took me a little while to understand that. Finally, one day I prayed, I said, Lord, I don't understand this document. I don't understand the Bible. And I finally come to realize that I was sacrificing the little things I had for other things I didn't need, such as tobacco, alcohol, and I was neglecting my responsibilities as a parent. I say this because everybody makes mistakes, including the government, whether it be courts or other things. because of lack of information. But we can see that the government has it all. They have been ready, and I'm calling upon the government now to resolve this issue, not just Ontario, but Canada as well. This has gone on far too long. Too many people have been hurt. I hate to think of this as a contract to kill, but many people have died, many people have been hurt, not just because of the action of taking the land, but because of lack of revenue and a number of other things. So God bless you all, and I hope to gain your attention with the next chapter, which will be coming in the next few days, after I get feedback from this, from my family as well. Thank you. Miigwech.